Unsportsmanlike conduct, excuse me, on the Jaguars. No issue, no implication, ball game. 34-31 behind the backup quarterback, Jake Browning. This will forever be known as Jake Browning's night. 32 of 37 for 354 and a touchdown. Leadership, measured, poised, and next to perfect in his win here over Jacksonville. To add injury to this insult, a moment we must pass along here. Trevor Lawrence, late in this game, injured, stepped on by his own left tackle, and there you see the ankle rolled over the knee. It looked gruesome on a couple different joints there. The team is calling it an ankle injury. Lawrence did rise to his feet, try and get off the field under his own power, but was unable to. He was then helped underneath the tunnel where he was seen walking very gingerly, again with help. We'll bring you all the latest news on Trevor Lawrence when we have it. In studio alongside Emery Hunt, Bryant McFadden joining the conversation as well, and there is plenty to get to, gentlemen. We will address that injury, and in some ways it does overshadow what we saw out of Jake Browning. I want to begin with the backup quarterback who led his team like a starting quarterback tonight. Jake Browning was simply spectacular. How do you put into words the effort and execution we saw out of the backup?
Stay ready so you don't have to get ready is what coaches always tell you. And when you think about Jake Browning, he was ready for this additional opportunity. And what I love the most about his game was that he was not afraid to work outside, down the sideline to his #1 wide receivers. And what it showed the rest of the league is that, hey, you have to focus on your 1 through 53 and 1 through 65. Talking about the practice squad as well. And you got to make sure you get guys that can do the job at all positions through your depth chart. And Jake Browning stepped up in conjunction with Zach Taylor, who entrusted a lot of trust in his game plan to allow Jake Browning to look like the guy we saw his freshman and sophomore year at Washington.
Man, when you watch Jake Browning tonight, guys, it felt like I was watching Joe Burrow a little bit because of the cool style that he played with. He never got uncomfortable. He was relaxed. He was smiling. Even when they hit him a little bit, he didn't rattle. He was so cool, calm, and collected the entire ball game. I mean, think about this. On the road for a backup quarterback playing against a playoff caliber team, a defense that has been really playing at a high level. Only 5 incompletions the entire ball game. 32 of 37, 354, 1 touchdown, playing against a very opportunistic defense, a defense that was top 10 in turnovers, played smart football, and made plays when he needed to make plays. So for me, when you look at what we saw last week against Pittsburgh compared to tonight against the Jacksonville Jaguars, he was 10 times ready. You can tell he was well prepared. They had a game plan around him to do what he does best with his skill set, and he just delivered.
You're calling it faux Burrow, but it was all real on this night. He was efficient in his first week as a starter in the loss to your Steelers, BMAC. Numbers as a starter these last 2 games, 51 of 63 for 581, doing exactly what was asked of him in this offensive game plan. What did Jake Browning do for his career tonight, Emery? I mean, we could get crazy, we could overreact, or we could sit here and say, we know the ceiling of this young man, and it is higher than what we've seen out of other backups and maybe even some other back-end starters across the league.
Well, he just made a case for him to be the long-time reserve in Cincinnati, but also did a fantastic job of putting the rest of the league on notice, like, hey, I can be a free agent, I can be available, I can be of service to your football team if you want to increase your long-term potential. But this is someone that made the most of his opportunity. At best, he made himself a lot of money tonight for Cincinnati, but at worst, he just made himself secured as a long-term #2 to Joe Burrow.
Yesterday's price is not today's price. BMAC, we have to look at a more immediate reality for Jake Browning and these Bengals. 6-6, a head-to-head with Indy coming up here. We're again talking about playoffs, that he can continue to play football this way. Did tonight change the way you're looking at the remainder of this season for the Cincinnati Bengals?
Yes. Yes, Joe. Heck, you guys look at Cincinnati differently now as well, I would imagine, right? Yeah, so their playoff hopes are still alive. Because if you look at Indy coming up this week, you get Indy at home. Indy is 7-5. They won last week against the Tennessee Titans, but it didn't look good. So if Jake Browning can continue to deliver and play like he did tonight, if they can continue to run the football, defensively, it wasn't their best effort, but the Colts offensively is not the same as a Trevor Lawrence-led Jaguars offense. So you have to like that chance. They have a fighting chance. Before tonight's matchup, if you were to ask this question in regards to playoff hopes, I would say, hey, man, it's a wrap. They're competing, but because the playoffs, I don't see them getting in. But what I saw from Jake Joe Brownie tonight, man, he gives them a shot.
It certainly looked like winning football from start to finish in this game from Jake Browning. Imagine if they didn't ask 2 wide receivers to throw the ball. You know I love some trickeration, but that man was grooving, and that threw the groove off. But for a moment, we get overtime on a Monday night. We also get an injury to one of the biggest names in the game. It's being reported an ankle sprain for Trevor Lawrence, an MRI, further imaging being done on Tuesday. We can only hope for the best when it comes to the quarterback of the Jaguars as we take another look at this injury. It was amazing that they're not calling it a knee from where I'm sitting. It is an ankle. Trevor Lawrence, again, going to have an MRI on Tuesday. This changes plenty for a team that came into tonight, Emory, thinking if we win, we are the 1 seed. You walk out of tonight feeling like we might not have our starting quarterback, and the backup even got banged up when we saw C.J. Beathard.
A lot to unpack here, Joe. You look at the Jags, number 1, they have to learn to put teams away. They had this game won early, got to learn to put teams away that you are quote-unquote better than. And now with an injury to Trevor Lawrence, you expect their defense to lead from the front. Their defense is going to have to take the reins and help put teams away and help win games for them. But you also like what you saw tonight from C.J. Beathard, who showed you the value of having experience, starting experience in the NFL, because he came into the game ice cold, played lights out, got them in position to go into overtime, but then he got banged up, which means it puts into play Nathan Rourke, who was the CFL most outstanding player in 2022 with the BC Lions. He's someone that lit up the CFL, resigned his starting role with the BC Lions to take this job as a backup to Trevor Lawrence. But they brought in C.J. Beathard, so he is someone that's chomping at the bit for this opportunity. But it shows you once again, adding depth at every position. And they have someone right now that no one is talking about, but Nathan Rourke had a really good preseason, had a really good stint in the CFL. I'm excited to see what he can do if Beathard isn't able to go.
Leave it up to Emory to give us some quality information in regards to the CFL. That's why you're great at what you do, my guy. For me, Jacksonville, I don't want to, go into much with the injury because we don't know how severe it is. But, Joe, I agree with you. It looked ugly. It looked ugly when he was, trying to get to the locker room. Couldn't put any weight on that ankle. This is a very, very short week for them. They have Cleveland coming up. They travel to Cleveland. Then they have Baltimore, Tampa, Carolina, and Tennessee. This was a huge loss for Jacksonville because if they won tonight, they create more separation in regards to the Houston Texans and, of course, trying to be in the traffic jam of teams fighting for the #1 spot. And we talked about that during the pregame show. But now with them losing is one thing, but then you lost and you don't know the status of your star quarterback moving forward. So desperation is right in front of the Jacksonville Jaguars and taking care of their business, most importantly, but also, too, finding a way to win this division so that will guarantee at least a home game. So we don't know exactly how severe this injury is. It didn't look good. But, hopefully if they have to go to war with C.J. Beathard, as you mentioned, Emory, he has experience. But you got to find a way to win this ball game on the road against the Cleveland Browns. And, of course, after that, you got Baltimore, which was going to be another huge game.
It's crazy how quickly things can change, especially when you're talking about injury regarding the quarterback position in this league. If Lawrence cannot go in Week 14, that means of the 7 current AFC playoff teams, 4 of those 7 will have a backup quarterback starting at this juncture of the season. You look at that road ahead and you see what, Emory?
B-Mac jumped all over. He nailed it because this was a huge loss, in my opinion. When you think about that division, the Colts are 1 game back. The Texans are 1 game back, and the Texans actually beat them early in the season. So now if you're Jacksonville, if you can't win with your reserve quarterback, you have a situation where you might not win a division, and you may find yourself playing on the road in the opening rounds of the playoffs, if not out of the playoffs, because with the Bengals win, now they find themselves back in it, and they have a favorable schedule down the stretch. And then now we see they have confidence in Jake Browning. So this was a huge game, a huge loss for Jacksonville. We'll learn a lot about how fast this young football team can grow up out there on the field.
That we will. Let's take a look at that AFC playoff picture as it continues to change week in and week out. At day's end, at week's end, the Dolphins sit at 9-3 at the top of the conference. Ravens, they were off 9-3, watched all the chaos ensue around them, including a Chiefs loss and the Jaguars loss of their quarterback for how long we do not yet know. Steelers, Browns, Colts rounding out the wild card offering with the Texans playing great football. The Broncos not going away anytime soon. The Bengals now sitting at 6-6, and as we said, the head-to-head with the Colts coming in week 14. And I'd be hard-pressed to write off those Bills just yet either. Emory Hunt, there's still football to be played, and if this week is any indication, things are going to change. When you look at that, you see what?
Why the Jets in a hunt? In a hunt for what? Like
that's what you see?
That's what I see.
Mathematically speaking, they're still in the hunt.
That's what I don't get.
Tells us they're still in the hunt.
Hunting what becomes the question there. But the question maybe regarding this Bengals team is just how realistic is it to expect Jake Browning to continue to play football, the way he is right now? The efficiency when it comes to completion percentage, I mean, it's starting quarterback stuff. Did you see enough explosivity, enough wrinkles in that offense to feel like they're a playoff team?
I saw them get the ball out quickly. So I have to give credit and tip my cap to Zach Taylor, the head football coach, who called a superb game. He is someone that said, okay, I know Jake Browning tends to take sacks. He took some bad ones in this ball game as well, but they started with the screen game. They started to get the ball out of his hands quickly. As long as Zach Taylor is locked in and dialed in like Jake Browning was tonight, then yes, we can see a replicate performance from Jake Browning moving forward. Maybe not to this tune because it is all matchup based, but it all boils down to Zach Taylor trusting what he has out there in terms of his personnel. This is a professional league. B-Mac knows this. One guy goes down, next guy goes up, and this is a pro game. The guy that's behind the starter better be just as good or equally as good as your starter because he's a pro. And so you have to expect this to be, what Mike Tomlin say, B-Mac? The expectation is the standard, or the standard is the standard?
The standard is the standard.
That's exactly what has to happen for Cincinnati.
Yeah, and also, too, another thing that Mike Tomlin says, make routine plays happen routinely. That's what we saw. So the difference from Jake Browning's first start compared to what we saw tonight, I saw two things, guys. The defining moment for Jake Browning last week against Pittsburgh was that red zone interception, where he didn't really see the coverage good, and he forced it into a bad area. That jump start Pittsburgh that led to a scoring drive that ultimately led to them winning that ball game. In tonight's matchup, he was smarter with the football. Yeah, Emery, he took a few sacks, but I would rather see Jake Browning taking sacks than forcing the football in the areas he should not force them into, which will provide turnovers. The last thing that I saw in regards to the difference from start one to start two, having a healthy cast of pass catchers. Yes, we didn't see a lot from T. Higgins, but he surfaced.
Big one late.
In the fourth quarter. He surfaced in overtime. And when you have T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and Jamar Chase, Jake Browning feels a lot better in his ability in throwing the football. And we saw that tonight because, remember, they didn't have T. Higgins last week. So if Jake Browning can continue to understand, don't force it. It's okay if we punt the football. If he can continue to do that with those pass catchers, they got a shot. And that's better than what I thought before this game, because I didn't think they had a shot, and I didn't think they were going to win tonight.
Most certainly. It wasn't Coach T, but a great coach once told me, special players make special plays on special days, and Jake Browning was special in this one. Gentlemen, thank you as always. And don't forget, there's only one place to be each and every Sunday. That's with us, right here on Game Day Scoreboard. The second they go final, we're up and at it. Highlights, sound, reaction straight from the booth. Begins 4 Eastern on CBS Sports HQ.
My dog B-Max sharp in that picture.